Let me ask you something. You've been eating less, moving more, and you are doing gym. The scale finally moves. You're down 10 pounds, maybe 15, but you look in the mirror, and that belly, still there. Still soft, still stubborn. Here's what nobody's telling you. That belly fat you're fighting, it's not just sitting under your skin. It's living inside your body, wrapped around your organs. And losing weight doesn't automatically touch it. But here's the part that actually gives me hope for my patients. This specific type of fat, it responds to very targeted strategies, faster than almost any other fat on your body. So today, I'm going to show you exactly how to go after it. The right foods, the right drinks, and the specific type of exercise that science says works best. Let's get into it. Imagine this. A 44-year-old woman, let's call her Michelle, comes into my office. She's been eating clean for months. She's walking every morning. She even cut out dessert. And yet, her waistline hasn't budged. She's frustrated. She feels like her body is working against her. And honestly, she's not wrong. But not for the reasons she thinks. Here's what most people completely miss. There are actually two kinds of belly fat. The first kind is subcutaneous fat, the soft, pinchable layer just under your skin. And yes, that can be frustrating, but it's mostly cosmetic. The second kind? That's visceral fat, and this is the one that matters most for your health. Visceral fat is packed deep inside your abdominal cavity. It wraps itself around your liver, your pancreas, your stomach, your intestines. You can't pinch it. You can't see it in the mirror, but it's there, and it's active. Here's how I explain this to my patients. Visceral fat isn't just storage. It behaves almost like its own organ. It secretes inflammatory chemicals around the clock. And over time, that chronic, low-grade inflammation is what drives some of the most serious metabolic conditions we see today. We're talking type 2 diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, cardiovascular disease, and emerging research is even linking high visceral fat to increased risk of certain cancers. Now, I don't say any of that to scare you. I say it because once you understand what visceral fat actually is, the strategies to fight it start making so much more sense. And here's the genuinely good news. Ready for it? Visceral fat, despite being the most health-impacting fat, is actually the most metabolically responsive fat in your entire body. Meaning, when you apply the right inputs, the right foods, the right movement, it responds faster than the fat on your hips or thighs. So let's talk about how to actually do that. Let's start with food, because here's a fundamental truth. What you put on your plate every single day is either feeding your visceral fat or it's starving it. And one of the most powerful food-based weapons against visceral fat? Most people have never even heard of them. They're called carotenoids. Now don't let this sciencey name throw you off. Carotenoids are simply natural pigments found in plants. They're the reason carrots are orange. They're why tomatoes are red. They're what gives spinach and kale that deep, rich green. But here's the kicker. It's not just about color. Carotenoids are potent antioxidants. And that matters enormously when we're talking about visceral fat. Think about it this way. A big part of what drives visceral fat accumulation in the first place is chronic energy excess. Too many calories, especially from processed foods, that eventually triggers inflammation and disrupts your metabolism. Your cells get bombarded by unstable molecules called free radicals. And that oxidative stress throws your fat storage signals completely out of balance. Carotenoids step in and neutralize those free radicals. They reduce that cellular stress. And this is the part that genuinely fascinates me. When I look at the research on this, what stands out to me is that carotenoids don't just passively protect your cells. They actually influence gene expression. Specific carotenoids can switch on genes that increase fat burning and simultaneously dial down the genes that tell your body to store fat. That's not a small thing. That's your body's own programming being nudged in your favor. And we have solid clinical evidence to back this up. A randomized double-blind trial, one of the gold standards in research design, examined whether carotenoid intake directly affects visceral fat levels in participants. Over just 8 weeks of consuming carotenoid-rich vegetables, every single group in the study saw a measurable reduction in visceral fat. Every group. The most notable results came from participants consuming foods highest in lycopene. Think tomatoes, red bell peppers, alongside cruciferous vegetables. 8 weeks, real, measurable reductions in visceral fat specifically. So how do you get more carotenoids into your daily life? Honestly, it's simple. Go colorful. Carrots, sweet potatoes, red and yellow bell peppers, tomatoes, spinach, butternut squash, kale, papaya, mango. Any deeply colored fruit or vegetable is going to be rich in some form of carotenoid. This isn't about following some complicated elimination diet. It's about consistently loading your plate with color. Make it a habit. Your visceral fat will respond. Now, after carotenoids, there's another compound I want you to know about. And this one might surprise you because you've probably heard about it before, but not for this reason. It's catechins. Catechins are a type of flavonoid polyphenol. Big words, simple concept. They're powerful antioxidants that also have significant anti-inflammatory properties. And the best natural source of catechins? Green tea. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You've probably seen green tea marketed everywhere. And yes, the green tea burns fat claim is out there constantly. But most people don't actually understand why it works. So let me break it down. Catechins target visceral fat through multiple pathways simultaneously. First, they boost fat oxidation, meaning they signal your nervous system to burn stored fat for fuel more efficiently. They also increase your overall energy expenditure. Your metabolism, essentially, gets a nudge upward. But here's the part that really stands out. Catechins also inhibit an enzyme called lipase. Lipase is what your body uses to absorb dietary fat. So catechins are actually blocking some of the fat you eat from being absorbed in the first place. And then there's one more layer. Green tea naturally contains caffeine, and caffeine works synergistically with catechins. Together, they enhance fat utilization in a way that neither compound does quite as well on its own. Here's how I explain this to my patients. Think of catechins and caffeine in green tea as a two-person team. One unlocks the door to fat burning. The other walks through it. Together, they're more effective than either one alone. And we have a compelling clinical trial to support this. A double-blind, placebo-controlled randomized study, the most rigorous kind, found that participants who consumed catechin-enriched green tea at around 600 milligrams of catechins per day for 12 consecutive weeks experienced a significant, measurable reduction in visceral fat. 12 weeks. One cup habit level intervention. Now, a quick note on which green teas to choose. Most green teas contain catechins, but for maximum potency, you want minimally processed varieties. Matcha is the gold standard here, because when you drink matcha, you're consuming the entire ground tea leaf, not just an infusion. Sencha is another excellent option. So that's your food and drink foundation. Colorful, carotenoid-rich vegetables at every meal, and a daily green tea habit, ideally matcha or sencha. Now, here's where the real acceleration happens, because food gets you moving in the right direction. But the right exercise? That's the multiplier that changes everything. There's a fascinating piece of data that I think completely reframes how most people think about weight loss. A major meta-analysis pulling together data from 117 separate randomized controlled trials found something that might seem counterintuitive at first. When comparing diet alone versus exercise alone for reducing visceral fat, diet had the larger effect on total body weight. Makes sense, right? But exercise? Exercise had superior effects specifically on visceral fat. Read that again. Exercise, independent of the number on the scale, is particularly powerful at targeting the fat that's wrapped around your organs. And this is supported by one of the most striking individual studies I've come across. Participants in this trial did just 2 cycling sessions per week. 45 minutes each, moderate intensity. That's it, twice a week. After 2 months, they reduced their visceral fat by 48%, nearly half gone, in 8 weeks, with 2 sessions per week. And here's what makes this even more remarkable. Their total body weight barely changed. The scale didn't move much, but their visceral fat dropped by almost half. Their insulin sensitivity improved by 41%, and they lost 18% of their subcutaneous fat. This is something I talk about with my patients constantly. The scale is not your report card. The scale tells you your total mass, bone, water, muscle, fat, all mixed together. It does not tell you what's happening inside. You could be losing visceral fat, building lean muscle, dramatically improving your metabolic health, and the scale might barely flinch. Don't let it discourage you. So, what intensity were these participants working at? This is an important detail. The study measured intensity as a percentage of VO2 peak, not VO2 max. Without getting too deep into the physiology, for average non-athlete participants, this puts them solidly in the moderate intensity zone. That's the zone where you can hold a conversation in full sentences, but you're noticeably breathing harder. You sound a little winded. That's the sweet spot. Now let's talk about what the most current research says about the best types of exercise for visceral fat specifically. A comprehensive systematic review and meta-analysis covering 84 randomized controlled trials identified 2 exercise modalities as the clear frontrunners: vigorous intensity aerobic exercise and high-intensity interval training, or HIIT. Both were significantly more effective at reducing visceral fat than lower intensity activity. Now, what about resistance training? Strength work. Here's the nuance. Resistance training is not as directly effective for visceral fat reduction specifically, but, and this matters, resistance training is absolutely essential for preserving and building lean muscle mass. And muscle mass directly supports your metabolic rate. So don't abandon the weights. Just don't rely on them alone if visceral fat is your primary target right now. If you want to lose visceral fat fast over the next few months, prioritize your cardio intensity. Now, if HIIT and vigorous aerobic exercise are both at the top, which one should you choose? Honestly, when you look at the head-to-head comparison data, the difference between them is statistically negligible in adults. Both work well. There's a slight signal in the literature that HIIT with running may edge out cycling for a small additional benefit, and in younger adults under 24, HIIT may have a modest advantage over steady-state cardio, but we're really splitting hairs at that point. Here's what I actually believe, and this is rooted in everything I've seen in practice. The best exercise is the one you'll actually do, consistently, week after week. That picture-perfect HIIT protocol you dread, the one you do twice a month, will always lose out to the brisk walk you genuinely enjoy and can do 4 times a week. Consistency is the variable that matters most, not perfection. When I look at the research on this, what stands out to me is the dose-dependent relationship between exercise and visceral fat loss. A study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine confirmed it clearly. Participants who exercised more frequently or at higher intensity saw proportionally greater reductions in visceral fat. More input, more output. The relationship is that direct. And here's something equally important. That same dose-dependent relationship does not hold for caloric restriction. There's a ceiling. After a certain point, cutting more calories doesn't give you additional visceral fat loss. The body adapts. It fights back. So you don't need to starve yourself. You need to move yourself. A small, sustainable calorie deficit, combined with progressively increasing movement, is far more effective than aggressive restriction with minimal activity. So let's pull this all together into something you can actually use starting this week. For food, build every meal around colorful vegetables. Carrots, sweet potatoes, bell peppers, leafy greens, tomatoes. These are your carotenoid powerhouses. They're not exotic, they're not expensive, they're in every grocery store. Make them the foundation. Add a daily green tea habit, matcha or sencha for maximum catechin content. 1 to 2 cups daily is where the research shows meaningful benefit. For exercise, aim for at least 2 to 3 sessions per week, 45 minutes minimum per session. Whether that's HIIT, a vigorous run, a cycling class, rowing, or even a brisk walk. What matters is getting your heart rate to roughly 70 to 80% of your maximum capacity. If you don't track heart rate, use the talk test, moderate intensity. You can speak in full sentences but sound breathless. Vigorous intensity. You can only get out a few words before you need to pause and breathe. And remember, keep stepping up the intensity gradually over time. The dose-dependent response is real. The more consistent effort you put in, the faster your visceral fat responds. If you've been searching for science-backed health tips on how to reduce belly fat, what causes visceral fat accumulation, or natural approaches to improving metabolic health, I want you to know that everything covered here is grounded in peer-reviewed clinical research. No gimmicks, no shortcuts that don't hold up. That's what Dr. Sofia Cares is always going to give you.